Oh, John Bolton's sources, right through administrations. I was next to the World Trade Center towers the morning of the World Trade Center attack. I noted leading up to it and since interstates. I didn't know all their names. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is increasingly collusion slash S interstates, inter and intra campuses, with a whole bunch of names involved with child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, first force. The same names are involved with the elderly home and an untimely death at Trinity College at the same time, with people that were involved with murders intercities and confessions tied to that. Their probation officers planting evidences at Connecticut boxing gyms, all people tied to the same house slash S with extended family members involved with the name Scalora and Phil Cololo, further with a principal upskirt nature and more sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with houses next to the campuses that are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake conversations, and ties to me. They have throughout the country triages demonstrably for how they have it. I had perfect teeth too. I had perfect teeth. And they lied the first time. They pretended they gave me medicine before that, or they call it medicine. In other words, and then they forced me two times more. One time I forced people to call the police without telling them why. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed a Dillon family, non-verbally. I didn't communicate. A Dillon family, people involved with the owners and leaders of owners and work and family members of car dealerships involved with the Ray Cololo and a whole bunch of people that work with the Harvard Hospital's campus, including the security, foreign and domestic military involved with the World Trade Center attack. They said that a Scalora family is their cousin. Also, DeMoro said that. They used to seek me out and make confessions. And I recorded it, consciously observed that way and confessed that way. And they're pretending other. They have Wethersfield Police, Mendez, fake conversations with me. They have people involved with Afghanistan, Pakistan, Russia, Ukraine, a whole bunch of people from Korea tied to Harvard Hospital, and identity theft, fraud, slanders with people tied to the house slash us with the child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, and more people planting evidence on my street with them, intercities, and next to Harvard Hospital with the houses and businesses and criminal enterprises involved. Get me off the fake conversations with. These are interbranch putting fake transcripts since founding. These are names with the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices of Connecticut a number of ways through other natures of organized crimes as the names involved with our side and other countries, per worse with the World Trade Center attack and with North and South slavery that was entrenched before our founders were born. Our founders, it was more than England that had the possession of it here, and they were possessed there the same way right through founding. They frame and still they have our founders framed for slavery. Our founders directed us through the declassified. We were supposed to understand why and how they only have the security to let us know James Madison's name. And there were a plural amount of founders behind him that were strong enough to force key people at key locations to break the rules, not just of internationally monitored conversations. It was overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, and many Americans founders were born. But there were internationally monitored conversations to measure and maintain everyone an extent of syntactical agreements and collusions with themselves, against themselves and against everyone else to an extent. Otherwise, that body was sensed. Our founders, why do you think they had to hide who they were? And why do you guys think you guys don't know about it? Oh, it was to rise against kings. They started slavery, entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. You're going to speak up against kings? You guys are being used to sense too with the All Kings Day. They're being used to sense. There's natures of organized crime and right with the syntax inside the books in the school book depository. Is all we need. It's all recorded right there. Worse than criminal incompetence being and having been used remotely by worse. Forgiveness is so we don't leave out the poor worst part. A hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise we should charge, even if it's not standing. It's the trail. It's the method slash us everyone's using. You guys still have black pupils, whites of eyes left out from what it's inseparable from, the subject of slavery. and the breaching method our founders told us to blame that on. You don't pretend. See, they're being used to cents for the breaching method, the people with all King's Day. Think about all that money they wasted. Well, because they want to help the kids. They could have just collected that money and made in other words, made a game, made all kinds of whatever. You don't leave. The suburbs were designed by a torture, extortion, fact, human nature, slavery method. Before our founders were born, there were houses built by that torture, extortion, slavery method, north and south. No one wanted collusions, except for the fact that if they spoke up against it, they would be killed. And worse, and everyone around them. And that was just one of the things. And that was specifically for when we finally would come out of it. And the whole time, we would be natures of syntax. Like, for example, with value treatments like independence or unity, they can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper for that. We are a species body unified by nature itself, projecting that. And independent individual bodies of an individual species body. And there are totally different individual species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies. No one brings this up. People try to bring this up. It had to be. When someone does try to bring this up, people that have been speaking other too, right where James Madison's plan is the only correct answer for what caused the Declaration of Independence, other was and is taught at schools A through Z, sickly distinctly, specifically to exploit in the fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, the child abuse, sickly distinctly of their own kids too. A Leahy family has a little girl in their family and little kids in their family and ages of their family, different ages of their family work at Harvard Hospital together, male and female, different ages of the same family. Collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes and campuses since I was a kid, with a bunch of people involved with untimely deaths years apart, and how they forced collusions with people in my area with it, with federal crimes with it. And they'll tell you themselves. Everyone's being forced to speak through others. And other times they're trying to make the exceptions so they can supplant evidences. They say and do whatever to keep that quality of fact, human nature. In other words, interbranches, forging and switching names, and with the foreign countries involved. And they knew my wife before I knew her. My ex-wife, my Saudi friend. They forced her to collusion /S, interstates, with people involved on my street still, and since before they lived here in that house, tied now to 2 police chiefs and their intimate ties and their families involved with predicate acts against me. There's a Lewis family too. I don't know them. They're putting fake things in databases with an O'Brien family, a whole bunch of people with the mayors from Wethersfield, like a Gold family, a Ruth mayor related to a past mayor, and people associated with her and her neighbors, involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people from Saudi Arabia that Wethersfield police have collusions with, also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has a DeMoro family involved with wire and mail crime and fake transcripts at the Wethersfield Police Department. I never had a word of conversation in my life with the older Mendez brother. I only know him through others. He walked by smiling a couple of times when I was a kid. And that was, in other words, that was recorded. He was recorded involved with people that didn't even go to my campus that were planting evidences of people on my street. I don't know where they lived, the Mendez brothers. Increasingly, people that were tied to a algebra class teacher I had when I was a sophomore are increasing, and I was arrested when I was in that class. They came to get me out of that. Increasingly, that there was 3 other people in that class with me, and Anthony Agman. He's one of the ones involved with the Joshua Julian, with digital crimes, with Facebook, and with New Britain Superior Court and Wethersfield Police, like these Mendez police and others who attached me to fake conversations with them and at the police station, and wasn't at all. As a kid, now as an adult, they hid the lie progressions with the news that pretended that too. They attached little kids that are around the other kids, even when they don't even know them. They're in another classroom, but they're in the same grade. All kinds of rat trap tricks too. Then they try to take a picture to make it look like, in other words, These are people that are collusions with use/s of names on all sides of criminal civil cases and the interbranch in their roles with a whole bunch of different countries at the campuses. Saudi Arabia has roles with people from a whole bunch of people tied to a Joshua Striker are involved sticking fake things in databases, repeating things and pretend we had a conversation, and fake motivations too, screening their roles with the state judicial branch offices, with wire crime acts and methods, and people involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced, and more further, but also untimely death rolls and murderers rolls they have. And they don't understand any of the extent of any of it. That's why it's important to get it on paper, because there were foreign bodies involved with them, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. That's why it's important to get me off the fake conversations with the news and the faked and changed communications with the interbranch family members. They have collusions before the World Trade Center attack, before they had me arrested. And as ones were involved when I was a kid too, they were exploiting that. But at the time I wasn't arrested or anything, they were stacking predicate acts against me and others, intercities and intra-cities, in other words. So no, these are not legitimate roles with the intelligence agencies. People from Wethersfield have with the car dealerships too, and their family members, and their roles with Hartford Hospital, with their, whether they're undercover or what. They just say this fake transcripts there with the doctors and with the patients. And then sometimes they just have a patient say something to make it look like we communicated before that. As ones too, increasingly involved with people who planted evidences. Tim O'Brien recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has the father of a Rick Sanfaglione, has a Rick Sanfaglione involved with him with some people that say they're black KKK themed, Confederate flag themed roles within multiple police departments, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, collusions, untimely death collusions, murders, roles collusions, speaking fake things and fake conversations, acting to make it look like people had a conversation into databases. In other words, all kind of little tricks. And I only know them that way. It's recorded. They're also recorded offensively, pretending others recorded. That's why we have to get them on paper, one name and sequence into branch. These are also people with Sandy Hook campuses involved intercities with these people named O'Brien and a Leahy family and a judge Killian. And there's a Dr. Zeman who's also involved with this Leahy family, with seating juries and judges and prosecutors and their kids involved with sexual and medical offenders, digital crimes. Also, lighting forensics has been changing, faking, hiding, and obfuscating digital evidences, all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices that Whiting Forensics has, with interstate state police families, with people named Collusion, like a Philip Collusion, Eric Jensen, are ones that sought me out on my street to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have collusions, planting evidences on all sides of my street and the parallel streets. They have federal evidences crimes, also with their educators tied to that, which is a pattern of the people. In other words, increasingly, and I don't know, Kevin and Mark Carone, like quick moments, I was near them. I never saw them on the inside of a campus in my life, except for Central Connecticut State University. And I left that campus. I left that classroom because they were already involved with, sexual and medical offenders of kids and sexual circles with people in my area tied to them. And in other words, whatever they've been saying in the background, the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is involved with them with organized with identity theft, fraud, standards. I don't know if they know about it or not, or if they're collusion, they're not knowingly. Mark Violet and others at Hartford Hospital and next to it have multiple police forms and agencies, people with UConn roles with him and his brother, and their roles with unmarked police forms, and some Lost Toledo themed, some black KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, involved with this Mark Violet and Eric Jensen and others that attach me to fake locations with their educators too, try to make fake exceptions and with the locations is on the campuses. And these are ones with the Wethersfield police who attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, now as an adult. And they have collusions with various natures of federal criminals, some of them as co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in a 2006 district court case in Connecticut, as ones involved also at and next to the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center is all kinds of uncharged organized crimes and whole methods of them and relative delusions, where you guys have replaced what our founders communicated about the founding. And you have them sensing to make sure there's collusion self-value too, with All Kings Day. In other words, you guys can't, you have experts that have you pretending things that are debatable that are not. And pretending things that are not debatable that are real. James Master's plan is the only real answer for what caused the Declaration of Independence. You guys are out of your mind, screwing up the kids' minds, telling them that there's slavery in entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, but we're against kings. Get down. I'll gather around. Vaccine.